This is an academic paper
Pay per
by
view then.
the American Psychological Association. Welcome to the Not Badger for the week ending September 24th, 2016. Here, thanks to our privileged straight cis men who are trying to work off the guilt from their crimes of historical and felony oppression, we have compiled a collection of funny, interesting, and hopefully useful clips from our most watched shows. Enjoy the spoils of their hard work. In Polecat Cast number 88, we talk about the news of the week, including circumcision, a new space-age condom, and post-traumatic Trump disorder.
Old Testament, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
I love how he mentioned the degree of satisfaction, he says, in people who are able to make the decision for themselves. You know, unlike the millions of neonatal circumcisions that get done in the United States and have been done in the United States, at least they had a choice. And where the infants, of course, never did.
Yeah.
And it certainly doesn't justify what happened in Florida with a judge imposing circumcision on a little boy who was saying he didn't want it.
How old was the boy?
4. So he was old enough to know exactly what was going on, and too young to fight back.
Yeah.
And obviously no problem with consenting adults who know what they're doing, who decide to have that done, because for whatever reason someone can decide for themselves that they want to have longer, perhaps even tantric sex. But doing it to someone else is to say you want them to last longer in bed. Which is, a pretty sick thing to do to an adult, to cut part of them off because you want them to last longer. But to do it to your son because you want them to last longer for someone else is still pretty sick.
So
I want to show this to the suffragettes. I want to take this 100 years back in time and show this fucking article to them and say, do you reckon you're ready? Do you reckon women are ready for the vote? Because this is you 100 years down the line.
yes.
Yay?
Are you sure that
machine.
that wasn't their goal? When the suffragettes in the UK began agitating for women's suffrage and only women's suffrage, a quarter of UK men had the legal right and capability to vote. 3/4 did not.
That's 1 in 4, people. 1 in 4, to put it in
Yeah.
statistics you all understand.
Yeah, just like Mary Cassa's rape statistics. And the thing is, there were suffrage movements already. There had been suffrage movements. There was a fight for suffrage that had been ongoing for like 100 years. And like prior to that, just, earlier in the century, there was, it was 1 in 5 instead of 1 in 4. And there were laws passed that opened the vote up to a few more men. And I mean, it started out as a thing that wealthy landowners had the right to do. And it was a long, hard fight before the average person had the right to vote. And the same thing kind of happened in the United States. It had a slightly different course, but after women got their voting rights, there were still poor and minority men and women who, due to various state laws and other circumstances, didn't have the right to vote. And there was an exception for Chinese. There was, there were things that kept Native Americans from voting. I have an article about this, suffragettes can't save feminism. And I have a second article, suffragettes still can't save feminism. The first one is on breaking the glasses. The second one is on A Voice for Men. And they both sort of outline the fact that the suffragettes were not just a feel-good women's rights, yay voting kind of movement. They had other goals. And we were looking at elitist, rich women who stirred poor women up with the idea that they were going to get something that the rich women involved knew that the poor women were not going to have when things were said and done. They may not have expected the common person actually getting the vote. But I really do think that they expected women to be able to be used as a voting bloc for their own ideological purposes, for feminism's ideological purposes. And yeah, that is expected to lead to this kind of thing, partly because feminists have spent like the last 60 or 70 years teaching women and girls to be stupid little special snowflakes that are triggered by the slightest word said by the wrong man. You know, it's if they had gone around with baseball bats and hit these women in the stomach and made them puke, everybody would recognize how abusive that was. Everybody would be like, God, you guys are brutal. How dare you do that to people? That's wrong. But they hit them in the ego. And they took over half a century to do it. And they took going through social means, they took going through academic means, they took using the news media, they took every opportunity they had to turn women as weak as humanly possible. And this is what the result is. This special snowflake vomiting over getting a candidate in office that you didn't want. This is the result of 150 years of feminist activism. Thanks, feminists. You sure did create a huge number of strong, independent women, didn't you?
Women who are victims of violent crimes often refer to the experience of the public weighing in on the violent crime as the second rape or assault. The shaming, the being reduced to nothing, being treated as if our bodies being violated is less of a crime than someone's wallet being stolen. This is the second rape.
So that's kind of like what Amy Schumer did to that guy that she had sex with back in college when she was stone cold sober and he was so drunk he was repeatedly passing out. When she talked about it in her Ms. Gala speech and actually ridiculed his performance, right? That would be the second rape too?
That would be, yeah, because according to feminist logic, because he didn't perform well, Amy Schumer was raped because she wasn't happy with the sexual encounter. He raped her.
Everything she admitted to doing, it puts her on par with, what's his name, the young man that all the feminists went nuts about because he only got 6 months. Brock Turner. What she admitted to doing was just about the same as what Brock Turner was convicted of doing. And yet her speech is lauded as courageous and brilliant.
Punching up.
And he got protested because he got out of jail after 3 months. They actually showed up in an area not too far, actually, from where I live. I probably could have gone there if I wanted to and seen the protest and marched in front of his house and yelled terrible things in front of all of the neighborhood children and made a huge stink because they didn't think his punishment was enough for doing almost the same thing that Schumer got lauded for. As far as gynocentrism and feminism are concerned, now, gynocentrism, if you really want to understand gynocentrism, all you have to understand is the fact that society in general has a protective and nurturing attitude towards women and girls. That it's not necessarily like feminists have their patriarchy theory, conspiracy theory, right? This isn't a conspiracy. This is just an attitude. It's a natural thing that people have. And it probably evolved with us due to the circumstances under which humans evolved over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And it's not an evil thing. It's not a malicious thing. But it's gotten to a point where it's not functional in today's society. We're trying to form an egalitarian society, and we have pressures that are pushing us towards an egalitarian society, but you can't be egalitarian if you are willing to sacrifice the interests of one sex because you have a protective and nurturing attitude toward the other. That needs to be evened out to the point where we have a protective and nurturing attitude towards all people. And we do not force anyone to sacrifice for that. That needs to be something that people will stand up for on their own if they support it, but that we do not turn around and treat anybody like they're less simply because of their like I said, they're irrelevant factors. Feminism is not just gynocentrism. It's a political effort to capitalize on gynocentrism for political control and power and for financial gain. And that's where the difference is. Feminism couldn't succeed without gynocentrism. But even without feminism, gynocentrism would still exist.
Yep. Absolutely. Feminism just kind of politicizes it.
I don't think companies realized that it was okay to market to men, this way. Because you look around, it's deemed creepy instead of being celebrated the way it's celebrated when companies market sex toys and companies market anything to enhance sexual pleasure for a woman. It's deemed creepy when they do that for men. It's wrongfully treated as though they're encouraging something bad. And it sort of goes back to that whole thing of gynocentrism. For the longest time, especially in the United States, we had this sort of Victorian attitude towards sex, that it was not something to be publicly discussed, and it was not something to be treated like it was a good thing. It was just for procreation, and how dare you think about it as something fun and something that you might do just for fun. What's wrong with you? You pervert. And women got out of it sooner. Feminists don't like to admit that. Feminists will talk about slut shaming as long as the day exists. But in the end, when you look at writing online about who is actually getting shamed for having an interest in sex and having an interest in sexual partners, you don't find a whole lot of websites with men complaining about women hitting on them when they didn't want to be hit on. You don't find a whole lot of websites full of men complaining about being spoken to on the street by the wrong woman. You don't find a whole lot of websites with men complaining about catcalling. You don't find a whole lot of websites with men shaming women for looking attractive, attempting to look attractive, or even for attempting to get attention because of sexual attraction. You find that with women. You find women's websites out there, hollowback, talking about men who have asked women for attention in some way or another and condemning them as if they've done something horrible. You have sites like, I can't remember the name of the one where they shame guys on the tube for manspreading. Then there's sites like that all over the internet with women bitching and moaning about being, and I think some of it might actually be humble bragging. Oh, look, I'm so attractive, this guy wouldn't leave me alone.
Yeah.
But it's all an effort at shaming men. So you have these companies are looking at whose sexuality is marketable. Whose sexuality can we capitalize on? Where is the money? Well, the money's been with women all this time. And then obviously, it hasn't all been with women because there are sex toys for men. But you don't see them as openly marketed. You don't see them as openly discussed. And when they do get discussed, you get women that come out and act like something disgusting is being discussed. And it's not. So it's not a huge surprise that it took this long. But it is a very pleasant surprise that it's happening. And it should be happening.
Now for the Doge and Bunny Show number 2, with a side of deer, as we look at the concept of intersectional psychology, because something.
This is an academic paper by the American Psychological Association, written by Lisa Rosenthal of Pace University, entitled Incorporating Intersectionality into Psychology, an Opportunity to Promote Social Justice and Equity. So allow me, this is already hurting my soul. So allow me to read the abstract. Just so you guys know what the whole overall thing is, okay? Intersectionality is receiving increasing attention in many fields, including psychology. This theory of framework has its roots in the work of black feminist scholar activists, bell hooks for example, and it focuses on interlocking systems of oppression and the need to work towards structural level changes to promote social justice and equity. Thus, the current interest in intersectionality in psychology presents an opportunity to draw psychologists' attention more to structural level issues and to make social justice and equity more central agendas to the field. The large, ever-growing bodies of research demonstrating the wide-ranging adverse consequences of structural and interpersonal level oppression, inequity, and stigma for the health and well-being of many diverse groups of people support that these issues are central to the field of psychology. We, as individual psychologists, and the field as a whole can work to fully incorporate the insights of intersectionality and therefore contribute to making social justice and equity more central across the varied subfields and realms of our work. Specific ways that we can do this are to A. Engage and collaborate with communities, B. Address and critique societal structures, C. Work together to build coalitions, D. Attend to resistance in addition to resilience, and E. Teach social justice curricula. Teach social justice curricula. There are important examples within and outside of psychology that can guide us in achieving these goals. These suggestions are meant to foster conversation and consideration by psychologists all across all subfields and areas of focus.
We're going to stick this in here just because reasons. It's not like, for your consideration, you could potentially examine or re-examine it. No, just use this as an opportunity to spread our shit, because why not? But the other thing which I'd like to point out here is, I suppose it's just part of the overall allure of social justice. Like, if you read this, because I sort of read through this, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to, like, turn off the part of my brain that knows what I know about social justice and feminism. And I read it again, and I was like, this sounds awesome. Like, if you don't know what this is, it actually sounds kind of good, because it's like, oh, engage and collaborate with communities. Great. Mm-hmm. Address and critique problems. Great. Work together and build things. Great. You know, again, it just sort of struck me again. They have, again, this just alluring language and all that they stick across it. It's just, it really is the polished turd of academia.
Psychology is going more and more the way of, well, if they say it, it must be true. But it's not. And when you're dealing with people in any kind of therapeutic practice, you definitely listen, and you're empathetic, and you write everything down, and you make notes. But at the end of the day, you have to make a clinical diagnosis. And Dr. Peterson gets into this because he's kind of an old school psychology clinical guy. I have to cough, excuse me. Okay, thank you. He gets into this, that when someone comes to him with gender questions, his job is not to get on board and agree with everything they say. His job is to listen and diagnose, given what he knows in his clinical experience, and give his professional opinion. And we've moved away from that kind of critical, maybe if someone comes to me and says they're a cat, I'm not likely to say, you're a cat. I'm likely to go, okay, tell me about that. And of course, I'm not going into psychology. I'm not dealing with people who can speak at all. But that would not be the way I would go in terms of therapy and in terms of wanting to do good for getting them well. So it is very refreshing for me to hear everything that you've said, Tildir, because that is not said here. That is not said right now in academia. And when you study psychology, the paper that we're looking at right now, which we will get back to, you see how I did that? I'm tying it back in. But the paper, this is a typical paper. This is a typical paper. You've got the word stigma. You've got intersectionality. You've got everybody mentioned except white men. Check. I could play bingo with this fucking paper. Psychology's recent increased interest in intersectionality presents a valuable opportunity for the field to make social justice and equity more central agendas and to be at the forefront of calls for radical structural changes to promote the well-being of all people. In other words, to translate to, normal humans, we're going to make radical changes for your own good. I find it interesting. She uses social justice. I didn't actually do the word count, but it's way up in the double digits and how often she uses social justice. What I didn't see her do was really define exactly what that meant in the context of race, gender, sexual identity, and class. She's obviously writing for a converted audience that she assumes already understand what these terms mean. And that is very clever because you then, if you come along and say, so I noticed that you haven't specifically mentioned white men. Why is that? Why did you leave them out? Then it's sort of a plausible deniability. Well, I didn't really mention anything. And it's slippery. They're clever. They're clever in how they leave things purposely vague. So we go on down. I'm looking at my notes. She cites bell hooks, so everybody take a fucking drink. Because anytime bell hooks is cited, anytime bell hooks is cited in anything in one of the sciences.
Why didn't she capitalize bell hooks?
Bell hooks doesn't capitalize her name.
She does.
She's a special snowflake. She's
a special snowflake like E.E. Cummings.
Can we get a short explanation why bell hooks is cancer?
She is the quintessential
not a short one.
feminist. She is one of Anita Sarkeesian's favorite feminists. She worships her. She's a.
What's the stupidest thing that bell hooks says?
Well, interestingly enough, she expresses herself fairly well, which I think is at least in my opinion, which is again why if you just look at it, bell hooks is a good read. You read her and you go, wow, that makes a lot of sense, and then you put it in the greater context and you're like, oh, well, all right. So it's more the assumptions that bell hooks is putting forward about society and what it means with privilege. So if you don't ascribe to privilege as it is currently being used, then you probably will not get a lot out of bell hooks writing.
If you don't believe it.
She refers to our society as an imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, highlighting intricate connections among multiple systems of oppression. All of those things are bad.
Okay, so essentially if you don't accept the premises of the belief system, you're not really going to get much benefit. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. The summary of the mass psychology of fascism goes like this. The question at the heart of Reich's book was this: why did the masses turn to authoritarianism even though it is clearly against their interests? Reich set out to analyze the economic and ideological structure of German society between 1928 and 1933 in this book. In it, he calls Bolshevism red fascism and groups it in the same category as Nazism. Reich argued that the reason Nazism was chosen over communism was sexual repression. As children, members of the proletariat had learned from their parents to suppress sexual desire. Hence, in adults, rebellious and sexual impulses cause anxiety. Fear of revolt as well as fear of sexuality were thus anchored in the character of the masses. This influenced the irrationality of the people, Reich would argue. If the theory of mass psychology hinges on things like sexual repression and creating a sense of anxiety to control the masses much easier, then that was a thing that I thought of that sort of pops out because feminists are extremely sexually repressive to both men and women, and they create a great deal of anxiety, especially the intersectional ones, because of their talk about the way that they organize things and the way that they silence conversation and the way that they, their talking points. And what is the goal of telling someone that they have to check their privilege? It's to make them feel awful about it. Did you see Donald Sutherland the other day? He was on like a news thing and he was like, I was told that I have white privilege and I just realized that it's true, and I'm a terrible person, and I should apologize. And he was under control right there. They got him, and I wonder if there is
I'm a sinner.
connection.
I'm a sinner.
Right. He was born into original sin. So, we can move forward, but I apologize if that was completely worthless. But I'm thinking that there's a connection.
If I may,
pedophilia.
Yes.
I am not going to, if I may, on the paedophilia topic. Thank you, Alison. I will step away from that, although this topic may be related. It's interesting, Brian, that you actually mention about how feminists and intersectional feminists are becoming increasingly sexually repressed. I actually just yesterday got done reading a paper, which I referenced in a video I actually published earlier today, that I read a paper was much the same as this. It actually read much more like someone's blog than an academic paper, asserting that dildos are becoming a tool of oppression for women.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this thing which was like all about the sexual liberation and freeing women from men all those decades ago is now becoming a means by which women are being oppressed by men, because it reminds them that there are real dicks out there that they could be getting, but they shouldn't be wanting those because reasons. So I have to wonder whether this is going to become, a part of the new feminist discourse, that even the use of a sex toy that in any way even resembles a man or the function of a man is going to be oppressing women, which I think is going to take us back round to the radical, crazy feminist lesbian thing where they were saying all those decades ago, if you want to be a true feminist, you must be a lesbian. Which basically then, for straight women, that kind of just puts sex off the table completely for them, more or less. And then if using a dildo is oppressing you, you're going to not use that on ideological grounds, and then that puts you in that sexual repression state that you were talking about with the possible rise of fascism.
People should get pissed at this. I mean, there should be forget the riots over Trump. There should be peaceful protests over this. Over this.
I disagree.
I think we should cleanse the filth.
Exterminate.
I think that's what I was thinking.
There is no peaceful solution for this heresy. In the Emperor's name, we must reclaim it.
It needs to be purged, the whole thing.
Margaret.
When you're getting to the point where this is the shit that you're writing and it's considered an academic paper worthy of printing, put behind a fucking paywall, put forward by the American Psychological Association, it's supposed to be a trusted source.
We can address structural issues and advocate for structural level changes that promote social justice and equity, thereby improving the health and well-being of communities experiencing oppression, inequality, and stigma. And my note was ... but only for some, not for men. So it's so specific. We're going to change the world to benefit people, but not all people.
This is why
that's my note.
In good conscience, tell men to call or take part in the mental health field, because they may be treated like a project that needs to be fixed, not like somebody who's coming to someone for mental health, and getting help for their issues, but treated like this, like you're broken, but it's your fault that you're broken. And I'm gonna fix you for the benefit of others other than yourself.
Teaching social justice curricula. We can incorporate social justice into our program and individual course curricula for all levels of training. Many psychology departments include multicultural and diversity themes in their curricula, as APA identifies, quote, individual and cultural diversity, end quote, as a core competency included under the cluster of professionalism. This is true, and has put forth guidelines for addressing these themes in the field. This gets back to what I was saying earlier. The idea of considering a multifaceted approach and considering someone's environment and all these different factors, not fucking new. We never called it intersectionalism. We just called it looking at someone in context. However, we're now taking that one step further and saying, one example of how psychologists can build on and add to multicultural and diversity curricula to address social justice and equity issues is to directly teach about power and privilege at a structural level in psychology courses. Where the fuck is Sargon's petition? Because it's right there in black and white. Psychology, you're going to learn about power and privilege at a structural level in year 1. So
this is religious. This is religious thinking. None of this stuff is properly. It's not scientific thinking. It is religious thinking, and they are teaching it as a quote unquote science. This is fucking terrifying.
We just need to do a structural level change and teach people this thing in level 1. No, fuck off. You're taking something which is basically just a bunch of assertions from other people's circular referencing and saying this is absolute truth and we must teach it. And I was just reading through further on here. They're saying they want to advocate for the importance of acknowledging and addressing power dynamics between and among instructors and students, connecting to intersecting identities to promote student empowerment. This ties into a paper which I actually covered on my channel not very long ago, where someone was talking about how, again, it was another feminist academic who was saying, knowledge is not something to be given by the teachers. It's something to be explored by both. Knowledge is not objective and absolute. Knowledge is something that is created. And so it was basically like, yeah, teachers can learn from their students, man. It's like, no, they really can't. You are at this course to objectively learn things which are objectively true, or to learn a method of critical thinking that will allow you to work out what is objectively true. You are not here to just spout a load of your bullshit and then have your teacher go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Blackie. I'm gonna take into account your identity, and you're completely correct because that's your experience. What's that, Leza? That's a wonderful life story you've got over there. I'm going to take that on board, and we'll consider that as your truth of reality.
That's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Yeah.
This is literally just, we want everyone's opinion to be the absolute truth. And it only matters then...
And not our opinion.
Yeah, it's like everyone's opinion matters as long as you're in the protected class. If you're in the protected class, then your opinion is the absolute truth. And this, I think, explains so much when it comes to people that we see doing interpretivist nonsense. They genuinely think that their opinion is true. It's like when you look at people like Anit Sarkeesian doing her content analysis, which I like to just say is just a very fancy way of saying subjective opinion wankery. It's just... You're just going to spout that your opinion, your reading of this piece is some absolute truth that everyone has to follow because you based it on someone else's opinion before you. That doesn't prove shit, and yet they're still running with it.
Moving on to Honey Badger Radio number 72, we rant Zerk on one of our own videos and try to determine if Allison is right or wrong about the Church of Women Worsting.
The criticism over it hasn't been massively widespread, but the people that some of this criticism is coming from, or some of these expressions of "you've betrayed us," because they're coming from people who are very, very involved in this and have been for a long time, and we feel close to, both Allison and myself feel close to some of these people who are essentially like, we knew you would just fuck us over. That they were willing to essentially give her the least charitable interpretation instead of essentially saying, maybe she's going somewhere interesting with this. Which it would have been what my assumption would be, given her 13-year record of advocating for men's issues and stuff like that.
Not to mention her long record of having this type of, interesting outlook on things where she
and very subversive
from a different angle. And she describes things from a different angle, to the point where, numerous times, satire of hers has been mistaken by mostly feminists. It's been more rare for MRAs to make that mistake. But mostly feminists have mistaken her satire for being serious.
Well, and
some deliberately, and others because they're just not able to parse
Yeah,
it.
but and a lot of it too has to do, I think that most MRAs are very much of the opinion that Allison is a net benefit to this movement, but I don't know, like, there's a reason why her channel didn't take off the way mine did, let alone the way Sargon's did,
Shots
and
fired.
he's not an MRA. I mean, he talks about the same things, and he's way more popular than I am at this point. Bering and other anti-SJWs and stuff is because she's much less accessible. She's extremely cerebral and esoteric. You have to really work to understand what she's getting at. And it's not because she's not explaining it properly or she's not explaining it plainly. I think it's because the ideas themselves are so counterintuitive. They are so against the grain of what just feels right to all of us that we just don't pick them up in the same, like it's the difference between soundbite politics and actually having to explain why the wage gap is a load of hooey.
Well, and that's something that in the 60s and 70s, that was a common way of approaching things. That was, people were very much like that in dealing with stuff. We've gotten to a point now where we are a meme and soundbite society.
Yeah.
And people aren't used to that, and so they're not looking for it to happen. And at first they don't get it. And I've noticed with Allison that when they do get it, the minute that they do get it, they're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But before they get it, a lot of times they get pissed off because they think she's doing something entirely different than she actually is.
Yeah, there's like a huge resistance. And even if they don't assume she's doing something the opposite of what she actually is, there's still, I think a lot of people are still going to resist the ideas until something clicks in their mind, until that last puzzle piece, she puts that last one into place and they're like, fuck, oh my God, now I can see the whole fucking thing, you're right. And so essentially, I think that that's what this, like, I don't think that this was just trolls. And I do think that, a lot of the, because it wasn't just feminists and it wasn't just the feminists who are sort of friendly and sort of having a dialogue with certain MRAs who were screaming at us about being Islam apologists and stuff like that, right? I mean, like, there were people like Tyler Preston who were flat out saying, this is Islam apology and blah, blah, blah. I think that there is a tendency among all humans to knee-jerk when you even question a set of beliefs that they consider to be just a given.
There's sort of a conflict between the need to promote something that goes against the grain of society. Compassion for men, and not just compassion for men, but equal compassion to the compassion that we have for women, which is, it's unheard of, probably throughout human history, to have equal compassion for men. And then also the interest in making our ideas popular. And the thing is, we have this misconception that we can get our opponents and the fence sitters that have a vested interest in remaining or believing themselves to be neutral parties, basically middle grounders. And middle grounders, they're not moderates, they're false moderates. They take a position between two other positions, and by defining those two positions as both being extreme, whether they are or not, they consider themselves to be moderates. But if you take a position between a moderate position and an extreme position, labeling that moderate position doesn't make it extreme. It just puts you in the middle where you're sort of extreme, and you are mistaking sort of extreme for being moderate. If you had two positions where one position was, everybody should have the right to just punch people in the jaw whenever they're angry, and the other position was violence is wrong, the moderate position between those two positions is still advocating violence. It's still saying, well, there might be some situations where being angry justifies just punching someone in the jaw. Well, no, that's still advocating violence. It's not moderate. It's still extreme. And we're never going to be popular. We're never going to persuade ideologues who are invested in their particular ideology as a group to like what we do. Especially not the ones who make money off of it, especially not the ones whose political power depends on sticking with their ideology. And we're not going to get people who are invested in seeing themselves as moderates to change either. And I mean, this is something that I've encountered over and over and over again in various men's rights forums, in other political forums, in non-political forums where political stuff gets brought up. There are certain types of mentalities that you cannot appeal to. And it's okay to not be appealing to those people. And the thing that we need to do is not let that stuff keep us from talking about the issues and focusing on the things that we focus on. With the bottom line being, are we defending a human right? And are we defending keeping that human right genderless and raceless? This is something that we as a movement can do. We don't have to try to be popular. We don't have to try to get everybody to like us. And we don't have to agree on everything. We have the left pushing for something that doesn't actually exist. Liberty without responsibility and accountability. And if you don't have responsibility and accountability, you really don't have true liberty. You have chaos. You have the ability to get yourself into loads of trouble. But at some point, you're still dependent on others to fix things for you because you don't have responsibility and accountability. This is like a good example of this being the so-called strong, independent, single mom who is on welfare. You're not strong and independent if you're on welfare.
Oh, even if you're not on welfare, if you're taking a daycare subsidy or, food stamps or...
that's all welfare to me. If it's a payment coming from the government and it's not because you are disabled, you're an able-bodied person who is receiving a payment from the government for your life expenses because you can't or don't earn it yourself, that's welfare.
I sat on a panel at the Wisconsin State Libertarian Party convention with Amanda Billyrock, and the panel question essentially was, why are there so few female libertarians? How can we get more female libertarians? And when the question was posed, how do we get more female libertarians? What I said was, you don't want to. Because the moment that you do, you will lose your libertarianism. There is going to be a small percentage of women who value liberty over security, who value freedom over safety. Those women are already here. And if you go and actively recruit women based on, this cool libertarian thing, it's like this cool social movement, it's great, come on in, what you're going to get is you're going to get a watering down of your values because women in your own movement will begin to demand that you prioritize safety and security over freedom and liberty. That is what will happen. I guarantee it. Here's the personality freaking research that proves it. Like, most men aren't libertarians. And men are more likely to value freedom. They're more likely to calculate the freedom versus safety metric much more towards the freedom end than women are. And most men aren't libertarians. So what makes you think that women are going to join your group in droves and not irreversibly change it?
If you look at the history of women as a voting bloc, and women have to a degree been a voting bloc in the United States since we got the vote. If you look at how women have voted just in the United States over the last 100 years, it has been almost entirely for government programs to serve women and government control over families and government control over small business and large business communities, everything it's been for authoritarian social micromanagement.
Yeah, no,
you think about the way girls and women are from early childhood.
Tattling.
Yes, that's the thing I was about to bring up. And this is something that was brought home to me as a little kid reading Beverly Cleary novels, the book about Ramona Quimby when she was in the first grade. And I noticed when I was reading the book, the first grade teacher had to tell the girls, not the boys, the girls, nobody likes a tattletale. And it was all about the girls' behavior. The book was all about the girls' behavior at that point in time. And it's a common thing
Yeah, whereas the boys were all like in A Christmas Story when the dude stuck his tongue to the freaking flagpole.
Double dog dare you.
Stuck. Yeah. Nobody here is a rat fink.
The teacher has to go out and find him. And the kid doesn't talk about being bullied either. He doesn't tell his parents. He ends up duking it out with the bully. This is the difference between how boys and girls handle things. If you want that to change, if you're a dad out there, if you're a mom out there, if you want that to change, raise your daughters to take responsibility for themselves. When they come and tattle to you, tell them to deal with it unless they are in immediate, serious danger. If someone's picking on them, if someone's giving them, the third degree, if they don't like something about their room or whatever, if they see somebody disobeying a rule and it's not impacting on them and they come tell them to deal with it. Don't encourage that kind of stuff. Tell them that this is bullshit. You don't have to use that word, but don't tolerate that. You train them from the time they're little kids. And if we can teach girls from when they're young that is not tolerated and that it is their job to be responsible for themselves and to let other people be responsible for themselves, we might eliminate a lot of problems in society that exist today. The epidemic of malicious prosecution, and I will call it an epidemic because nobody should know 3 different men who have endured multiple year ordeals of vexatious litigation and malicious prosecution over a custody battle.
Yeah.
I know 3 different men who have gone through several years of being repeatedly falsely accused by their ex-wives or ex-girlfriends, and they're using that as a tool in a custody battle with impunity. I think what happened here with Trump that a lot of people don't understand is that there was a huge, huge disconnect between the Republican elite in Washington and the grassroots Republican.
The voter.
Who really, a lot of the things that the Republican elite, was almost like they were on autopilot. We've been saying these things for 20 years, so if we just keep saying these things, our base will stick with us. And the base had changed significantly. Their social attitudes had changed significantly. And while they were with them on fiscal matters, they were not with them on social matters. And Trump figured that out, and the rest of the Republicans didn't. And that is part of why he rose to popularity. It's a large part of it.
And I would say, too, that I don't think Trump's comments about LGBTQ people were just like sort of a political ploy or anything like that. I think that his record since at least 2000 has been that he believed that they should be protected by the 1964 U.S. Civil Rights Act, that there should be some kind of equivalent to marriage for same-sex couples. You don't necessarily need to call it marriage, but with all the same rights and privileges, that he would never have any problem hiring an LGBTQ person or appointing them to his cabinet if he made a run for the presidency, that he essentially is like, I care more about the content of somebody's character than who they stick their dick in at the end of the day. That's always been what I have gotten from him. That's always been the vibe I've gotten from him. And I don't even have a problem with his pro-life thing. I don't think Roe v. Wade is in any danger of being overturned after, looking into how the SCOTUS works. And even if it is, if it goes back to being a matter of states' rights, I really don't have a problem if some women have to get on a bus and cross state lines in order to get their abortions. I don't necessarily think that inconveniencing people is the same as denying them certain services and certain rights. He can't make it illegal. It would take a completely different, even if Roe v. Wade was struck down tomorrow, it would take a completely different court case and a completely different judicial decision in order to bring about a blanket US-wide ban on abortion.
Yeah. Aside from the fact that if Allison is right about her mountain climber anchor metaphor,
it's never going to happen.
There'd be a lot of the people wouldn't want it, and a lot of Republicans probably wouldn't want to change it.
But the thing about Roe v. Wade is we're to the point in the United States right now where it would be prohibition again. If you overturn Roe v. Wade today with the social attitudes that exist today And with the
Yeah.
network surrounding the industry that depends on abortion and the attitudes surrounding abortion, it would just be prohibition. If people want to get rid of abortion, that is not, the law is not going to be an effective way to do it. It's not a smart way to do it.
We hope you enjoyed this clip show. If there was a clip from these shows you think we should have shown, please leave a comment on the video and include a timestamp. Thank you, and Badger on.